Mr. Speaker. But the enforcement issues, we need to make sure that it's not firefighters out there doing it. They're there to do their piece, to look after the suppression of fire, the protection, removing people with the jaws and whatever the many ways that they have of helping and assisting.
Honourable member, I wonder, would you mind adjourning debate on this bill?
Certainly, Mr. Speaker, I would adjourn debate and look forward to speaking to this at great length on a future date.
Okay, thank you. There has been a motion to adjourn debate. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. I'll recognize the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That concludes the government business for today. I'd like to call the hours for tomorrow between 9 and 5 p.m., where we'll have daily routines and committee and resolve it to the Committee of the Whole House on Supply.
There has been a motion to adjourn the House till tomorrow at 9 a.m. with the hours as outlined. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The motion is carried. We're now going to move into the emergency debate, as was read out earlier, and it was introduced by the honourable member for Yarmouth, and I'm going to recognize the member for Cumberland South to start it off.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have to say, Mr. Speaker, for the first time in 12 years since coming to this legislature, I am not pleased to be here tonight. And the responsibility for that, Mr. Speaker, lies squarely on the government's shoulders. Squarely on their shoulders, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to read the therefore be resolved that brought us here tonight to begin the process. Resolution was read, Mr. Speaker, by the honourable member for Yarmouth. There was also one read by each and one of our members, which was identical. Therefore be resolved. Therefore be resolved. All members of this House immediately call upon the Premier and his Minister of Education and Labour and Workforce Development to immediately seek a resumption in the talks with community college faculty across Nova Scotia, so the 500 Nova Scotia students, for example, in Cumberland County, will not see an interruption in their studies. Mr. Speaker, that resolution, along with the one that was done generally for all community colleges by that government, Mr. Speaker, was turned down. Flat no. And Mr. Speaker, it's their responsibility, and they're the reason we're here tonight. Mr. Speaker, before I begin, I'd like to take the opportunity, if I could, to introduce some people in the gallery. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the East Gallery, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce these people, and I'd ask if they rise as I say their names. Mr. Grant McLean, Mr. Clifford Maillet, Scott McClellan, Bruce Kellaway, Bill Redden, Tim McLeod, Steve Wells, John McKay, Danny Eddy, John Driscoll, Liette Doucette, Kyle Marriott, Carrie Butler, Alexis Allen, who is the Nova Scotia Teachers Union President, Susan Noyles, Angela Gillis, who is the Provincial Executive, and Simon Wilkins, who are on the Provincial Executive. And I would ask, Mr. Speaker, these very well-known Nova Scotians to please rise and receive the warm welcome of the House. And Mr. Speaker, I think everybody in this House would have to appreciate the fact that they do not want to be here in the legislature at 10 o'clock to midnight on a school night. One of the first things said to me tonight was, you know where they have to be tomorrow morning? They have to be in the classroom instructing Nova Scotians as they are trained and paid to do. And that's where they want to be, Mr. Speaker. They don't want to be here tonight. They don't want to be on strike. They don't want to be facing the situation that they are. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? Again, who's responsible? The Premier, the Cabinet, and the members opposite. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to, for the members present and the members in the gallery tonight, just read a portion of what transpired this week in the legislature. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I asked a question, and the question was, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, will he step in today at the 11th hour and treat these Nova Scotian Community College teachers as equals in the education system by resolving that dispute today? Mr. Speaker, shamefully, here was the Premier's response. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can advise the member opposite I have no intention of stepping into the middle of what is a collective bargaining situation. I think it should be resolved at the table. I would hope the representatives of the community college staff will go back to the table and negotiate with the community college as is the appropriate circumstance. Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, as I said yesterday, and I'll say again here tonight, certainly a different song was sung when he's on this side of the House.
Yes.
And everyone in that front bench that were here certainly sang a different song. And we could go back and answer it and pick up your words. And for us to be here tonight and what you're doing to these people, you should be ashamed of yourselves.
Graceful.
It's shameful to force these people onto the street. Teachers, professional people. When you sat over here, when you sat on this side of the House, it was a different story. You bet it was. You said everything under the sun. Honourable members, to force the government at the time to do what you thought was the right thing to do, to interfere in negotiations, to ensure that strikes wouldn't happen on behalf of your union brothers and sisters. But all of a sudden, Mr. Speaker, they've changed seats, but more has changed, more than just the seats. Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, one thing I heard continually during the campaign was a better deal for families. Better deal for families. Well, we heard the Speaker, we had the Premier say yesterday, he didn't say a better deal. When we questioned him about a member in this House and a minister, what did the Premier say? Somebody got a good deal. Yeah. Well, Mr. Speaker, the people in the gallery tonight and the teachers around this province are getting a raw deal. And the members can hang their heads because they know that. They know that. They're getting a raw deal. And you're in this side of the House, you advocated for them, but you're forgetting about them all now, aren't you? That was then, and now is now. Mr. Speaker, teachers' contract settlement in February. February 6, 2009. Province and Nova Scotia Teachers Union reached a tentative agreement. Negotiators with the province and the NSTU, representing 10,000 public school teachers, reached the agreement late Friday, February 6, after 3 days of conciliation. The union's bargaining team recommended to its provincial executive that the contract be accepted. This agreement recognized the importance of retaining qualified teachers and enabled all parties, including government, to work together to meet the challenges of providing a quality education to students. Public school teachers received a 2.9% salary increase in each of the 2 years of the agreement, and the contract expires on July 31, 2010. Mr. Speaker, I can assure the teachers of the gallery tonight they're going to hear from the government members. They're going to blame it on the past government. There's no question about it. Everything that's come before this House in the last 3 weeks, their way out of all this is to blame the previous government. Well, guess what? Nova Scotia has elected you. You're the leaders today. You make the decision in government. It's up to you. If you think what you're doing is right, then that's great. But don't sit here and talk tonight about blaming the previous government, because the previous government is gone. I admit to that, and that's right. And I was part of it, and we're over here, and you are definitely over there. That's right. Mr. Justice, you're right. You're absolutely right. You're in the government. So now you can do what you said for 10 years you would do. For 10 years. I listened to every chance you had about what you would do in government. Well, now's your chance. You have the opportunity. In fact, if the Premier or the Minister of Education would like to speak, I'll sit down and take my place and let that person speak. Well, Mr. Speaker, you know, things have changed, haven't they? That was then and this is now. Well, Mr. Speaker, we must value the work of our educators. And for this Premier and Minister to repeatedly stand in this House of Assembly and say they won't help is a shame. Their heads are stuck in the sand. The NSTU is pleading with the Premier and Minister to at least bring back both sides to the table. Nova Scotia Community College people want to get back to the table. And Mr. Speaker, we do as they do respect the bargaining process, but to have honourable members stand before more than 25,000 students and 2,200 employees and say they will let the process work itself out naturally is a huge, huge mistake. The 2.9% given to the 10,000 public school teachers was done out of respect and good negotiation. And Mr. Speaker, I defy anybody to stand in this House and tell me that community college employees don't deserve the same. They're doing the same job, they deserve the same respect, and they deserve the same result. Mr. Speaker, under our government, 8 public school boards advocated for a significant funding increase in 2009, 2010, and we provided it. These funds allow the boards to maintain programming and pay their bills, even in tough times. School boards have collective bargaining requirements regarding notice of workforce adjustment that requires boards to know their funding in early April. In most years, this information is provided immediately prior to the provincial budget being tabled. School boards have new funding of $28.9 million, or 2.9%, was provided in these contract negotiations. In addition, Mr. Speaker, funding related to collective bargaining settlements in 2008-2009 was provided. As a result, School board budgets will increase by $44.8 million. That's a 2-year deal that satisfied 10,000 unionized public teachers who we respect very much. Mr. Speaker, our leader, the former Minister of Education, who worked collaboratively and honestly and in full transparency with the Nova Scotia Teachers Union in the past, is extremely passionate about this issue and, of course, is appalled that it has not come to a full resolution. She is appalled that the Minister and the Premier have not stepped up to the plate. Years of hard work, mutual respect, and strong relationships are being tossed out the window. And why? Because this Premier Minister have another agenda. They are setting the bar so low and hope to fly under the radar. Mr. Speaker, it goes without saying that our leader would move the Rock of Gibraltar to settle this contract issue, as would our entire caucus. As the Minister of Education, she worked tirelessly and hard and developed a mutual respect that she considers one of the most greatest legacies as the Minister of this portfolio. Her strong relationship with the new Teachers Union got the job done, Mr. Speaker, and she got the job done. So, Mr. Speaker, what is the overall impact of not settling this issue? I'm going to break down exactly what it would take for the Premier Minister to resolve this issue tonight, Mr. Speaker. The difference between 1% and 2.9% roughly for 930 teachers is $1.5 million. That's what the government would need to put up, $1.5 million to settle this issue. Keep students in their programs and teachers doing what they do best. Furthermore, this increase is only 2.8% of this government's $54 million political slush fund increase. $54 million that they increased that fund by, and the Honourable Minister of Finance knows that. Yet they're unwilling to budge, unwilling to put an even par with the other public teachers in this province. Historically, Mr. Speaker, both the public school teachers and the Nova Scotia Community College teachers have always duplicated contract negotiations. Why should one group be made to suffer because of the timing of their contract? Different times does not mean preferential treatment. It's not fair, and to them, Mr. Speaker, it's a slap in the face. Let me say, Mr. Speaker, I don't blame the union, and I don't blame the community college faculty for not negotiating. They're being told by this government that they are not on the same playing field as other teachers in this province. Mr. Speaker, the impact of the strike could be devastating. What impacts can we expect to see from that? Particularly, Mr. Speaker, around the trades and the continuing care programs. The previous government cooperated fully with the community college and formed a customized continuing care program, for example. This program was designed to help meet the labour demand for long-term care facilities. These facilities need trained staff to meet this demand, and with the strike, Mr. Speaker, not only do the students suffer, but the people who need them as well. And Mr. Speaker, when on this side of the House, many, many times, the governing party of today pounded away saying how much need there was for more long-term care beds, and I'm sure they haven't changed their minds on that today. Well, Mr. Speaker, empty beds without staff to look after them are useless. These students have a job after graduation, and now they're told they may have to wait. Mr. Speaker, $1.5 million to settle this issue. A 1.9% would make this difference, and the Premier and the Minister appear to be setting an example. They want to strike to send a message to everybody else in this province. Mr. Speaker, they did not campaign on this, that's for sure. That's not what the NDP party talked about during the campaign. They talked about a better deal for Nova Scotia families. Well, here's your chance. Here's your chance to offer a better deal to these people in the gallery today and to Nova Scotia community college teachers around this province. Mr. Speaker, this union took an extraordinary step tonight as far as I'm concerned. They made two decisions. The executive made a decision that they will strike on the 20th of this month. And Mr. Speaker, I think it's incumbent upon everybody in this House to ensure that doesn't happen. But beyond that, Mr. Speaker, this union has offered a settlement, I believe, that the government cannot refuse. This union, probably, and I'm probably right in saying contrary to some members, has offered to go to binding arbitration. And Mr. Speaker, I was very proud to be part of adopting binding arbitration for police officers in this province, and I can tell you, there has not been one complaint to this day from anyone about that process. Well, Mr. Speaker, if this government won't give them what they deserve, won't match what they've given other public teachers in this province, if you refuse to do that, and if you refuse to show them respect to do that, then at least show them respect tonight by announcing that you will accept their offer and you will go to binding arbitration Let an independent person settle this once and for all. Keep the teachers in the classroom where they want to be, and as importantly, keep the students in the classroom so that they can take the training that they want to do. A lot of these people that are training for future careers have a huge financial risk, have borrowed money from their families, have borrowed against their homes to allow them to go back to school. A lot of them are mature students. They cannot afford this strike. It cannot be allowed to happen. So I'm asking you, on behalf of the people in this gallery, on behalf of the teachers around this province, and on behalf of the students, 25,000 students, 2,200 teachers, accept the offer they've made. If you can't show them respect and give them the raise they deserve, accept their offer and give them binding arbitration they've so graciously offered tonight. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable Government Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's obviously parts of the member from Cumberland South speech that I agree with, and there's many of it I don't agree with. But what I do agree with is that the instructors at the Nova Scotia Community College are the finest in this country, that we respect the work they do, and indeed the students that go to those institutions, campuses right across this province, Mr. Speaker, are well educated, they're well prepared for our workforce, and it's a credit to the instructors. Now, Mr. Speaker, we find ourselves at this point today, or in time, because of where we find ourselves as a province economically. That's the reality of it. You know, we're facing difficult times, Mr. Speaker. There's no two ways about that. And for people to deny that economic reality is being disingenuous, Mr. Speaker. So we have to negotiate, and I know that the union is negotiating with that in mind. And you know, Mr. Speaker, that their ability to stay calm and focused is another testament to the strength of character of the employees, because those teachers work very hard. And you know, as it can be expected at a table, and when you're coming down to this very narrow point in negotiations, that it's easy to lose focus and not respect the system, Mr. Speaker. But to their credit, and I can say I'm not surprised, that they do. They respect it, and I can appreciate it. It's very, very difficult. You know, Mr. Speaker, the Nova Scotia Community College has an important role in working with business and industry to prepare students for these jobs. Now, Mr. Speaker, in the text of the resolution, it talks about preparing them and for work. You know what would happen for work shortages. We on this side of the House certainly understand that. That there was a colleague of mine once said in the legislature here that you go to universities for an education, you go to Nova Scotia Community College for a job. And Mr. Speaker, we understand and believe that to be fact. That it's the ability within the various campuses that allow the transfer of programs and so on from one campus to another to reflect the changing demographics, or reflect the reality of where certain courses can be taught. And these teachers respond to those needs, and which could mean that in your own riding, Mr. Speaker, the Marconi campus, where we may see something moved out of there, maybe to as far as the Strait Area campus, Mr. Speaker. So it's all about the diversifying of the workforce and the instructor's ability to meet that demand and to respond to it. And we respect that, Mr. Speaker. And that's, that's why when during this process, when people say, well, why not, where are you at in this? And clearly, Mr. Speaker, our role is to encourage the parties to go back to the table and find common ground. And as it's often said, let's find a way to get to yes. This is very, very difficult on everybody, Mr. Speaker. And we want to talk about the 25,000 students, Mr. Speaker, because as I said, there's certain things I didn't agree with the member from Cumberland South, but there's many things I do agree with. And Mr. Speaker, the idea of these various students that come from all backgrounds, Mr. Speaker, some come right out of high school, others, as the member said, are often returning back into the workforce and being retrained. And there's uncertainty around that, and I understand that, Mr. Speaker. And but we have to realize that where we're at economically, Mr. Speaker, and what we have to do. And these issues aren't as black and white, Mr. Speaker, as the previous speaker would have you believe. That it's just do this. And so, Mr. Speaker, these things are very difficult. But we want the negotiations to go on. We want a successful conclusion, Mr. Speaker. We believe that the reasonable people will find a reasonable resolve. So it's really our wish that the negotiators could get back to the table and negotiate and hopefully come up to a resolve, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the fact that that wage settlements in the past 2 years are just not affordable today, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to say to the chagrin that Nova Scotia's financial circumstances have fundamentally changed, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, expenses now outstrip our revenues. The province is losing tens of millions of dollars in revenues and faces a $590 million deficit, Mr. Speaker. Revenue projections for the next couple of years show further declines, Mr. Speaker. This challenge is compounded by the fact the last 3 years the previous government allowed expenses to grow beyond the province's ability to pay. Nova Scotia was on a non-sustainable path, Mr. Speaker. No, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. The honourable member has the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, these are tough times, and we're trying to deal with them the best we can, Mr. Speaker. We inherit a legacy, Mr. Speaker, and we're trying to help Nova Scotians get out of it. And Mr. Speaker, there's much there's much to be said about how we're going to do that. And Mr. Speaker, it is the tough decisions will have to be made. Mr. Speaker, this government, we're not going to ask any one group to carry this burden by themselves. We will try to lighten the load, Mr. Speaker, as best we can. But there is the fiscal realities, Mr. Speaker. And that's what we're left to deal with. So, it's my friends across the way like to say that they took care of workers, and I suppose in some way, with a wink and a nod, they took care of workers. So, Mr. Speaker, I was here during Bill 68. Mr. Speaker, I was here when the EHS workers were put on the street, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, that's, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please.
That those times, we saw, Mr. Speaker. Let's put Bill 68 in context, Mr. Speaker, because this was a bill let's look at it, Mr. Speaker, because what happened was we had people at the bargaining table bargaining in good faith. They were in what is often referred to as a media blackout, Mr. Speaker. So what happened, while the two parties were in trying to negotiate a deal and getting very close to it, rather than wait to see if reasonable people could come up with a reasonable solution, the government decided to bring Bill 68 forward, which at the time caused a maelstrom of protest, Mr. Speaker, because for the very reason that they didn't allow the negotiation process to take place. They went and they infuriated healthcare workers from one end of this province to the other. But apparently, Mr. Speaker, they couldn't allow reasonable people to do a reasonable thing. Now, you know, Mr. Speaker, but we just want to do that, and it's important that things are put in context, Mr. Speaker, because you know, we got here for a reason, Mr. Speaker, and we agree with that.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Order, please. The honourable
Well,
member
Mr.
has
Speaker,
the floor.
We misled nobody,
Pardon me?
Mr. Speaker. You know, and it's too bad, Mr. Speaker. It's too bad, Mr. Speaker, that they want to talk about, you know, misleading people, because it's by and large it's somewhat unparliamentary. But, Mr. Speaker, it's not about misleading anybody, Mr. Speaker. It's about telling the truth, quite honestly, Mr. Speaker. You know, we have said that there'll be no rollbacks, there'll be no wage freezes, Mr. Speaker. We'll not lay off public servants, Mr. Speaker, as past governments have done. We will try and go through the negotiating system, Mr. Speaker, to get reasonable people to get a reasonable settlement, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, it's particularly hard, you know, when we have to dig ourselves out of such a financial quagmire, Mr. Speaker. But it's one that hopefully, with the diligence of the Premier and Cabinet, that we'll find our way out of it, Mr. Speaker. We'll work our way out of it, and we'll work our way out of it with the help of people, right-thinking people that work at the community college, that teach the fine students there, Mr. Speaker, and that we will come a day when the offer on the table may be a bit more generous, Mr. Speaker. In a day that we're not constrained by a never-burdening debt that was left to this government, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're trying to do. You know, Mr. Speaker, it's so difficult to try and put these in words and say these things, because you know, you want to do what's best for these workers, and you want to do what's best for all the Nova Scotians, and you want to do it within a financial context, you know, Mr. Speaker. But it's about the ability to control your way, how you're going to right the ship called Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, and allow the process to take its full course. I would encourage our friends in NSTU to, you know, get back to the table, to talk to the people at the Nova Scotia Community College, Mr. Speaker, and to continue with the work that you know, again, all Nova Scotians are proud of. I mean, I agree with the member from Cumberland South when he says that's not platitudes from one side of this House or the other, Mr. Speaker. It's real. It's meant. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, it's the financial time in which we live, Mr. Speaker. So you know, it's, you know, we have to live within our means, Mr. Speaker, and that's something that the former government didn't realize, Mr. Speaker. It's funny when they talk about in terms of they spent only because we made them spend it, Mr. Speaker. That's an interesting parlay. But I guess in fullness of time we'll find out how we made them spend that money, Mr. Speaker. It wasn't this party that bought kiddie ATVs, Mr. Speaker. It wasn't this party. So, Mr. Speaker, that's the reality of it. That's the reality of it, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I talk to the people. I'm talking to the Speaker, who I'm supposed to speak to. Thank you. Yes. So, Mr. Speaker? Yeah. Well, Mr. Speaker,
The honourable member has the floor, please. Order.
yes, Mr. Speaker. Well, I want to close and say it's time to look forward and work realistically, Mr. Speaker, to create a better future for all Nova Scotian families, Mr. Speaker. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. The Speaker now recognizes the honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to rise and join in the emergency debate this evening, although I'm not pleased that I have to be here for this reason. We keep hearing about choices from this government. We keep hearing about the tough choices the government has to make. When they prepared their budget, they had some choices to make, and they made a choice to prepay $341 million to universities that they didn't have to pay this year. And when I questioned the minister about it in estimates, she said one of the reasons why they chose to do this was to alleviate the university's anxiety over whether or not they were going to get this payment, which I found quite incredible because, yeah, funny. But I find it quite incredible that she said that because at the same time, we have families and students and teachers feeling incredible anxiety as we go forward through this process. So I'm urging the government to alleviate the anxiety of the students and the professional staff and teachers at NSCC. Now, I've heard from a lot of teachers over the last few days, and they are very anxious. They are suffering from a lot of anxiety, because they just want to teach their students. And they're telling me how much they're concerned about their students. And of course, this whole thing would have been easier to do if the previous government had signed an agreement with these teachers, but they chose not to. But so teachers are telling me about their students and how anxious they are. One teacher told me about a student who's here from Africa. He can't go home and wait for a strike to get resolved. Where's he supposed to go? What's he supposed to do? There's another student taking a 4-week course, but he's only in the 3rd week now. If they go out on strike, he doesn't get his course, and guess what? He doesn't get to keep his job because he needs the course for his job. There's another student that's working 4 jobs just to be able to afford to go to community college.
You got to work full-time now.
Well, yes, I suppose so. Now, at the community college, a lot of the students who go there don't come from money. These students are looking to climb out from the pit of job insecurity and minimum wage. They're going to community college because they want good, solid, secure jobs. And that's what we want for them, and I believe that's what the government would like for them. So I'm asking the government, please accept the union's offer of binding arbitration. Don't let this go on. There is anxiety in nursing homes right now. They don't know where they're going to get their future workers, where they're going to get the graduates, because if those students don't graduate, how are they going to fill their workforce needs? There's a lot of anxiety here today in Nova Scotia, and it could have been avoided if the government had made some different choices. The government could have decided not to prepay that $341 million to universities. It didn't need to be done. It was done for purely political reasons. It was done to inflate a deficit this year and make the bottom line look better next year. Tonight, we moved closer to a strike. Tonight, the NSTU set October 20th, by-election day, as their strike date. But unlike the government, they didn't just toss out an ultimatum, they didn't say, oh, 1%, take it or leave it. They gave the government an option. They said, let's go to binding arbitration. So I'm hoping that maybe this time the minister can interfere long enough to agree with it. The Minister of Education in Hansard on October 6, 2009, stated the following: "The best thing I can do as Minister of Education is to stay out of the negotiations, to allow it to go to its conclusion, and to trust that reasonable people on all sides of the negotiating table will come to a reasonable conclusion. I submit to you, Mr. Speaker, that it is not a reasonable conclusion to expect college teachers to be okay with being treated as second-class teachers. $1.5 million is not a great deal of money from their $54 million political slush fund. I think they could take it out of there. I think it is unreasonable to expect teachers to take a 1% increase when food costs have increased 5% over the last year. Mr. Speaker, how can anyone request either of the parties who've been at the negotiation table for 16 months with no additional resources to offer from the government to be any more reasonable than they have already been? Mr. Speaker, this government, like the previous government was planning to do, are using these workers as pawns and the students as victims in the government's game. The debate this evening is different from most debates in this House because we have a Minister of Education who is ultimately responsible to the NSCC and students in conflict with herself as Minister of Labour and Workforce Development. She is the minister responsible for the students. She is the minister responsible for the NSCC. And she is the minister responsible for ensuring that we have a well-educated, ready-to-work workforce. She sat here tonight in estimates and said she could not interfere. She couldn't answer questions about the negotiations. She has taken no responsibility. Work terms of students who are expected to be job ready and have jobs waiting for them are in jeopardy. This government has failed students and they have failed business. 25,000 students across this province are left in limbo. They are victims of the government's pawn game. The longer we look at this government, the clearer the big picture becomes. This is a premier, the head of an NDP government who spent 8 years in opposition raising people's expectations. He raised the expectations of students, teachers, anyone who would listen, and he was quite fond of raising the expectations of unions. How disappointed unions must be seeing this premier use fellow union members as pawns. In fact, it was up to the union to take leadership, not the government. The union has proposed binding arbitration. They have a strike date. They are making moves, and the government just sits back and says, well, we can't do anything. And how disappointed the students must feel at how this government has let them down. When in opposition, the Premier would often say that the government is the silent partner at the negotiating table. Well, tonight, staff and students are asking, why aren't you even in the same room? In a recent email to staff, the Community College's president, Joan MacArthur Blair, confirms that the NDP government has given them no additional funding to actually negotiate with the union. So what we have here, Mr. Speaker, is not collective bargaining like the Minister of Education is content to talk about. What we have here is a take-it-or-leave-it ultimatum by this government. What we have here is a Deputy Premier, an individual who in the past believed strongly in favor of collective bargaining and in fairness for workers, negotiating in the media. And we must ask, how fair is that? Government purposely chose this union to make a statement that says we will be tough. What they failed to do is to be fair. Now let's face it, there isn't a worker out there who relishes the thought of a strike, especially teachers who've dedicated their lives to educating our future economic generators, our best and our brightest. These teachers are passionate about what they do, and government should respect them for that and not treat them as pawns. The government must accept the union's offer of binding arbitration. Some time ago, I believe I was speaking in this House on during estimates for health, and I spoke about being a parent and trying to be a good role model, and about the lessons that we teach our children. And one of the things that my husband and I have tried to teach our children is about responsibility. And one of the sayings we have in our house is, "I am responsible." And when people are trying to evade their responsibility, when they are trying to pretend that it wasn't their fault, or somebody else, the dog ate it, or whatever, we look at them and we say, "I am responsible." And sometimes we think we've done a good job because, you know, we see a picture from our daughter's dorm room and she's got "I am responsible" on the wall, and that's what reminds her to study on a Saturday night instead of going out to have fun. And what we're asking tonight is for the government to be responsible, for the government to take good decisions. I realize that finances are tight, but they're not nearly as tight as the government would make out. And I cannot imagine how it is a responsible decision to say to one group of teachers, okay, you get 2.9%, but you over there, you get 1%, because they have not presented any convincing case why these teachers aren't worth the money that the other teachers are worth. It is not a responsible decision to create two classes of teachers in this province. It is not a responsible decision to allow a strike to happen in the middle of a school year. It is not a responsible decision to allow a strike to happen when we desperately need the workers who are going to come out of the community college. Over and over again, from diverse groups that I've met with since I became the education critic, we talk about the need for workforce development. And the NSCC is one of our finest institutions for creating workers. And so what are we doing now? We are saying to them, sorry, we're going to mess up your future. And by the way, if you have a job lined up, well, that's too bad, because you're not going to be able to graduate in time because there's a strike, because we sat on our hands because we wouldn't budge at all. We wouldn't agree to binding arbitration. We wouldn't agree to raising the offer on the table. We wouldn't give the college any money to work with. We just did nothing, except for over here, we had the Deputy Premier just saying 1% or nothing. So we have this sort of dichotomy where someone is willing to take responsibility, except for it's not a responsible decision, and we have a minister who's saying, sorry, I can't be involved. She is in conflict with herself. She is the Labour Minister. It is her job to make sure this doesn't happen. And if she can't do the two jobs, then maybe one of them should be given to another person on the back bench. All of us in this House realize that this is a difficult time financially. But we cannot create two classes of teachers. It is not fair, it is not right. And for a party that prided itself on standing up for people, on doing the right thing, I do not understand how, in all conscience, you can continue to pretend that what you are doing is anything other than creating two different classes of teachers. We already have two different classes of civil servants, the unionized and the non-unionized, the ones who got their raises earlier in the year and the ones who didn't get theirs this part of the year. For heaven's sake, don't do it to the teachers too.
Thank you. The Speaker now recognizes the Honourable Member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And at 11:15 at night, it's regretful we have to be here this evening, but we must be here, and we felt it necessary to be here to address a matter that the government has been ignoring, the government who spoke on and on and on about how they were fighting for working families of Nova Scotia. Well, we see what they're doing for the working class of Nova Scotia and the hard-working Nova Scotians that go to work every day to educate Nova Scotians from one end of the province to the other, Mr. Speaker. What they're trying to pull off here now is a disgrace. The duplicity of that government and what they put forward to Nova Scotians. And yes, as the Attorney General said, well, we're over here. Well, you're over there because you misrepresented yourselves to Nova Scotians, and we're here to hold you accountable for these people and everywhere else. Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Premier might not want to look at the men and women in the gallery, but I remember sitting when they were on this side of the House saying, look up at those working men and women. Look up at the individuals that you're not listening to. Well, who is not listening now? They're quiet as lambs over there because they know they are wrong and they're not doing right by the hard-working men and women of the Nova Scotia Community College and the countless thousands of students relying on this government to make sure they get a good education. Well, I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, over the course of my time available here tonight, we're going to talk about some of the facts. And I've listened very carefully to what has been said so far. And I've been watching the pattern of this NDP government. And it is not a good pattern. It's a troubling pattern. And it's a difficult pattern because they said they would set on a new course for Nova Scotia, and all we've heard is a discourse, minister after minister, issue after issue. And now we deal with the Nova Scotia Community College. And the Deputy Premier gets up and says that we are where we are. It's about the economy. We don't have the resources to do it. As our honourable colleague had just from the Liberal caucus said, they had no problem, Mr. Speaker, no problem. As my colleague from Cumberland South said, $1.5 million on the table. Yet the Minister of Finance will add deficit financing for something his own auditor told him not to do of $341 million on the backs of Nova Scotians, for the generations to come, for the students that these teachers are teaching right now, that don't know if they got a classroom to go back to. They're going to bear the burden of what this NDP government is imposing on them right now. It is wrong, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Finance knows it. The Premier knows it. The Deputy Premier, the entire Cabinet and the NDP caucus knows that what they're doing is wrong. Yet the Minister of Finance will add hundreds of millions for his own deficit hiding of next year. He wants to say, I can balance the books. So he's stacking the debt of Nova Scotians this year. Absolutely. That is wrong. What is right is supporting the teachers of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. He knows what he's doing. He knows it's wrong. He knows it's wrong. He spent $100,000 on consultants to tell him not to do what he has just done and adding debt to the people of Nova Scotia. He will not add $100,000 for those hardworking teachers that are representing their colleagues from one end of Nova Scotia to the next. The Minister of Health. The Minister of Health has hired Agent Orange to go out for 2 days a week to tell her how she can close down ERs in Nova Scotia. Another 100,000 for 2 days a week, when that 100,000 could have gone to pay for real priorities of working families who are working on behalf of Nova Scotians. She had a choice. What did she choose? To spend money that could have been spent on other priorities. So they need not say as a government they are working and staying within their means, Mr. Speaker. As we go forward into this discussion, we have a Premier and Deputy Premier. We saw all of it starts to come out clear. The cracks are showing. Earlier this week, when the Deputy Premier got up and said that 1,800 hard-working public servants that are non-unionized, it's too bad, so sad, you don't get the same benefits as your other colleagues you work next to throughout the province of Nova Scotia. The Premier goes out to say, oh no, that's not so. And they disagree with each other. One said one thing, the Premier tries to cover up again, and then we find out, well, the Deputy Premier wasn't wrong, because there is a wider agenda that they wouldn't come clean with. And Mr. Speaker, they need not, as they try tonight, and if someone else gets up, we got another speaker coming behind to remind them. They've had over 100 days, near 4 months, to get their priorities straight. They've gotten their massive deficit straight, but they haven't got their spending priorities straight on behalf of Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Premier wanted to talk about Bill 68. Well, you know what? There's different times, and Mr. Speaker, we also know it was about the issue of keeping hospitals open. It went beyond the settlement. By the way, Mr. Speaker, a settlement that was very large, and I think excess of 15% or so. We're talking about a government that won't even budge past 1% for the hard-working teachers in the Nova Scotia Community College. We're talking about people that have talked out of one side of their mouth on one side of the House, and they're talking on a complete other side of their mouth on that side of the House. The duplicity, the double standards, the double speak that is coming out of this government is scandalous, Mr. Speaker. It's scandalous what they're trying to dupe Nova Scotians, and they were very effective at mistelling the truth with regard to what their real agenda was. They've had time. They need not blame a previous government or a previous Conservative, previous Liberal government. It's theirs. They have a budget that's theirs. They've got a massive $592 million deficit that's theirs. But you know what? In that $592 million, Mr. Speaker, they couldn't even spare $1.5 million for all the hard-working teachers around this province. They couldn't get their priorities straight, but they have in their special spending, Mr. Speaker. And you know, the Deputy Premier talked about the ship called Nova Scotia. Well, we've seen clearly the Premier, his Cabinet, his caucus, has run the good ship Nova Scotia aground. But, Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you, there are those in the opposition that will stand up and rebuild Nova Scotia because they're tearing it apart, one timber at a time, has set Nova Scotians adrift with their priorities. It is despicable, Mr. Speaker. And the people that have come here representing their colleagues around Nova Scotia, that this government caucus won't even look up and acknowledge them, is sad. It's truly sad, Mr. Speaker. And I want to tell you, they want to talk about how they're going to do it. So they don't care if you're a non-unionized government member, you're okay to set adrift. If you're a hard-working community college teacher, you're okay to set adrift because you know that's not the case. But we've seen the Minister of Finance pad the books in certain areas for their priorities that have not met with what Nova Scotians truly want or need. We have a government caucus that's prepared to give a special deal at the border but not across Nova Scotia. It's pitting one region against another. It's terrible. And now they're pitting teachers against other colleagues. They're pitting one civil servant against another. But then, Mr. Speaker, in the Spring Hill record, we see a pattern. Now the truth is starting to emerge more fully each and every day that goes by. Because in the Spring Hill record, and I'll table a copy so the honourable members can get one and read it, where when they were talking about where the Premier, with his audit, that he was going to shave 1% that he indicates here to find extra money for priorities such as community college teachers, which he hasn't done. He indicates in here one of the things he can do is start cutting employees like Communications Nova Scotia. Non-unionized. Cut them and find some way to get some extra cash for other spending priorities of the New Democrats, which don't meet up with the true priorities of Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, and I'll table that and would ask the honourable colleagues in government to take a look at what their own Premier was saying. The pattern is more than disturbing. It is very telling, Mr. Speaker, of where this government, more importantly, where they are is where they're not. And they don't have their priorities straight. But, Mr. Speaker, this opposition knows what is in the interest of Nova Scotians. And I know even if, Mr. Speaker, or the honourable colleague for Victoria the Lakes, the government was asleep at the switch today because they put down every other resolution yesterday, Mr. Speaker, for every community college campus that we put forward, asking this government to do something about. And you know what? They voted against every single one. But one slipped through, Mr. Speaker, because they were asleep at the switch earlier today, weren't they?
They tried to turn it back.
And I'll quote one of the whereases, because it's on the record here. And whereas Edwina Donovan, a continuing care assistant student, is quoted in the Cape Breton Post as saying, "We came to school because we were laid off and wanted to better ourselves." Imagine that. Today's working families wanting to get back to work. And what do the NDP do? Slam the doors shut on them. Put their locks on the doors for the teachers. Mr. Speaker, it's people like Edwina that deserve to have the respect. At a time when the economy is suffering, this government should be investing in the teachers, who are investing in the students, who are the future of our economy. If they cared about the economy, they would care about the people, Mr. Speaker. But obviously, they've got other plans and designs that don't match up. They don't care, Mr. Speaker. What they cared about was power at any cost. And they'll do anything with power because if it serves their means, they're willing to do it. Well, Mr. Speaker, and I've heard today that we're going to have to live within our means. It's live within your means, but if it fits the NDP plan, then we'll do it to suit our purposes. Not the teachers, obviously, of Nova Scotia. You know, Mr. Speaker, they talk about their spending priorities here, and they get in with all this passion. We're talking about, what, 2.9%. They got one on the table. $1.5 million. But, Mr. Speaker, and I hope the teachers are listening, this is the party that is now paying 8% to take the HST off of those heating their swimming pools in South End, Halifax, but won't increase the deal for better wages for teachers around this province. This is a government that can't even get their priorities straight, but because they said we made a commitment, it is this, it's exclusively that, rather than doing what is right and just. That's their pattern. Spend $30 million regardless, as long as it was a promise. Shut down the border and give them a special deal because one member made a promise, never consulted with anybody, and now pits one region against another, pitting one bargaining unit against another. There is a pattern, and it's a bad pattern, Mr. Speaker, in this province. And as was stated, you know, in the Halifax Herald, yet again today, and I'll table this, but I'm going to read from it first, Mr. Speaker. Absolutely. A reasonable conclusion. Quote, "The best thing I can do as Minister of Education is stay out of the negotiations to allow it to go to its conclusion and trust that reasonable people on all sides of the negotiating table will continue to come to a reasonable conclusion." And that was the Honourable Minister of Education. And they say, "Minister, the negotiations you referred to broke down last Friday. There are no talks. After 16 months at the table, the Nova Scotia Teachers Union has been able to reach a reasonable conclusion, but not agreement, thanks to this government, thanks to the minister." And as our colleague from Bedford Birch Grove had said, Birch Cove had said, the Minister of Education is in a conflict because the Minister of Education should talk to the Minister of Labour about binding arbitration, but I mean, she could just have that conversation in one of the phone booths out there because it's herself. The Premier couldn't even recognize the conflicts, but we've seen that here today earlier about the conflicts already within this government, about the inability of this government to do what's right. And the Attorney General can laugh over there, but we know that you voted against a resolution for the Pictou County campus. But then again, Mr. Speaker, he's voted against police officers, he's voted against jails, he's voted against the true priorities of Nova Scotians. They gutted the budget on issues of infrastructure and investments that were necessary. They're gutting the process with regards to the people of Nova Scotia, the working people of Nova Scotia, providing an education, and the people of Nova Scotia are taking note. From one end of that bench to the back end of the NDP, that they will not forget. They will soon come to realize, and if a strike occurs, they have time to do the right thing, to make a deal, and a good deal, not the raw deal that they're giving to the Nova Scotia Teachers Union, our community college educators and teachers. This, Mr. Speaker, is their benchmark moment to truly prove themselves or turn their backs, as they've been doing on every other substantive issue we have seen. Mr. Speaker, we stand with the teachers here and their colleagues across this province. We stand with the students, their families, with the businesses of Nova Scotians, expecting the Minister of Finance and the Premier and the Deputy Premier and the Minister of Education and also the Minister of Labour to do everything necessary to support the economy of Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, if they're having a hard time finding cash, maybe the Minister of Education could talk to the Minister of Fisheries, because they seem to know where to get the loans around here and money. Maybe that's what they should do, Mr. Speaker. Because the double standard, the double talk, and the turning their backs on Nova Scotians, we've had enough of it. We stand with and for and by the people of this province that work hard every day and deserve a fair wage settlement. And if he can stack the books for his own political priorities, the Minister of Finance can give the money to the Minister of Education, to give the money to the Minister of Labour, to go to binding arbitration and give these people the deal they deserve, not the raw deal that the NDP have been serving up, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. The honourable member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island. The honourable member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today to speak to this very important resolution. Before I do, I want to acknowledge the hardworking and talented members of the Teachers Union who are up in the gallery, who are up there, Mr. Speaker, with their legal counsel, David Walbridge and Gail Gachillian.
We let you talk. Please let him talk.
Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. Order. The honourable member for, excuse me, order, please. Order, please. The honourable member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island has the floor.
I should say, Mr. Speaker, that I've spent many years in the post-secondary sector, as you know, and I've spent a little over 3 years as a critic for post-secondary education. And during that time, I traveled right across Nova Scotia to almost all of the community colleges in our system. I met with the president, and I met with the members of the community college. And I know we've talked about the faculty members at the community college as producing skilled workers, but I can tell you that the faculty members at the community college are producing more than skilled workers. They're innovative. They're contributing to productivity. In fact, they were shooting a film in my office this week, and many of the workers on the film set had been trained at Nova Scotia Community College, and the techniques that they had been developed at Nova Scotia Community College. So this is not about respect, Mr. Speaker, for the Nova Scotia teachers. We know what they're doing, we admire what they're doing, we respect what they're doing, and we would like very much to, and we recognize that. We have no problem. And we won't be lectured to, Mr. Speaker, by the members of the third party on collective bargaining. We will not be lectured to by a party that stripped workers on Bill 68 of the right to bargain collectively. And we will not be lectured by members of the third party that tried to strip workers of collective bargaining before the process even started in Bill 1. And now all of a sudden, Mr. Speaker, we have this newfound commitment to collective bargaining. You know, as my mother used to say, this is all the zeal of the newly converted. Anyway, as we have said several times in the House, Mr. Speaker, and several times in the media, this government strongly believes in collective bargaining. And I can speak from personal experience. I've been a faculty member at St. Mary's for almost 20 years. And for half of that period, I served in the faculty union executive at St. Mary's. and I was the union president through several rounds of collective bargaining. I can speak from personal experience about collective bargaining and what it means to represent faculty and what it means to represent workers. And yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I was invited to the Order of Nova Scotia. I was invited to the Order of Nova Scotia dinner, and I was sitting. Mr. Speaker, I was invited to the Order of Nova Scotia dinner, and I was sitting beside Colin Dodds, who was president of St. Mary's University, and we negotiated, I believe, three collective agreements when I was president of the faculty union and he was president of the union. And at the end of that,
Order, please. The honourable member has the floor.
You know, and Dr. Dodds and I were talking last night, and he said, you know, we negotiated 3 collective agreements without growing on strike, and he said, you know, one of the reasons why it worked is because we had a shared commitment to our students, to our community, to the university, and we believed in our students, we believed in our communities, we believed in the work we're doing, and I have no doubt at all that the Nova Scotia Teachers Union and the students and the administration have that same degree of commitment to their students and their communities and their institution. And I expect that they too will be able to get down to talking and, you know, and bargaining in good faith, as we did at St. Mary's. And so we won't be lectured to by the members opposite, Mr. Speaker, on collective bargaining and what collective bargaining means. We know. We have faculty members here. I see the Minister of Health. I see the member for Halifax, Chibacto. I see the member from Lunenburg West. We have all taught at post-secondary institutions. We have a number of members in our caucus who have taught at schools. They are teachers. We have members who have served on school boards. We have a great deal of experience here, Mr. Speaker. The collective bargaining process, Mr. Speaker, has served employers and employees well. And we know, and I know from being at the bargaining table, that it can be fraught with varying degrees of tension and conflict. Unfortunately, tension and conflict is built into the process, and sometimes that's what it takes to lead to a solution. You know, we have an adversarial system in the House, and we know that often takes us to solutions as well. But the process is structured to promote good faith dialogue where employers and workers can arrive at a solution to the challenges before them. Conciliation and mediation are also available to the parties at the table. Conciliation is part of the legislated collective bargaining process, and it's highly confidential. As a result, the parties speak for themselves on the process of negotiations. As the Premier, the Deputy Premier, my colleague, the Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Education have said, these are challenging fiscal times for workers, for employers, and for governments. We must all learn to live within our means. Of course, Mr. Speaker, we would rather avoid any work stoppage. But it is not our place to circumvent the collective bargaining process. In the event of a work stoppage, Mr. Speaker, our government has been assured by the college that they have a contingency plan. The college
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member has the floor.
The college, Mr. Speaker, will communicate directly with its students about their options and will keep them informed as events evolve. Students will be kept informed through email and through updates to the college's website, Mr. Speaker. We are confident that the college will make every effort to minimize the impact of a work stoppage. There is no doubt, Mr. Speaker, for any members of this place that the Nova Scotia Community College is an exceptional learning institution. As I said before, many of us have gone to the community college. Many of us have traveled through and taken tours of the community college. Many of us have represent constituencies that have community colleges in there. Each year, more than 25,000 students go through the doors at 13 campuses across the province, Mr. Speaker, in the quest for intellectual growth and a better life. And they get it at the community colleges, and they get it in no small measure because of the work of the teachers and the staff at the community college. These students learn valuable skills that are in great demand in Nova Scotia. They put these skills to work in communities throughout the province, building that better life for their families and making positive contributions to the communities they live in. They do this while they're in school, Mr. Speaker, and they do this year in and year out following graduation. That is their legacy to Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, if we want a province where our citizens can successfully earn a living and at the same time participate fully in a thriving community and economy, then we have to create the best possible environment for lifelong learning and skills development. Our government is passionately and intensely interested in helping to create this environment. That was the rationale, Mr. Speaker, for the millions of dollars that have been invested in capital improvements and growth to the community college system over the past 10 years. Mr. Speaker, the teachers and the staff at the Nova Scotia Community College play an important role in the lives of their students and the economy of the province. They are not just producing workers, Mr. Speaker. They are contributing to innovation, they're contributing to productivity, they're contributing to the growth of our province. We thank them for that. We thank them for their passion, for sharing their expertise and knowledge, for inspiring their students, young and old, as they develop new paths and the new products and the new ways of doing things that they're inventing in the colleges. Some of us in this place have known the satisfaction and sense of accomplishment that comes from being an educator. We know how difficult the profession can be, and I know most of us don't do it for the money. And we understand the frustration and the anxiety felt by teachers and staff at the Nova Scotia Community College. The government of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, and every member on this side of the House, many of whom are educators, all of whom have been students at one time or the other, have a great deal of respect for the work of teachers and the staff at the Nova Scotia Community College. With changing demographics, we must recognize the role of the college and the way it enhances the potential productivity of all the citizens in our province. Continued efforts to reduce barriers to employment for an increasingly diverse range of people is one of the keys to increasing productivity. Contributions of even one additional day per month from an individual who has barriers are as significant as increased personal productivity of a highly skilled individual. Mr. Speaker, we understand the stress that this situation has on professors, staff, students, and families of students, and the communities served by the college. At the same time, we must respect the will of the people who elected us, who challenged us to live within our means. While not wanting to appear trite, Mr. Speaker, for this very, very serious matter before us, we believe we are in a period of short-term pain, which will be followed by a longer period of long-term gain. We all have a role to play in this endeavor: government, employers, workers, and students. Government is already making sacrifices. Mr. Speaker, we are doing our part. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I would like to reiterate a couple of the points I've made. First, we respect the collective bargaining process. We are not alone in this stance. It has been an accepted and desired practice in this province for decades. Second, we respect the professionalism and the integrity of the parties at the table. Third, Mr. Speaker, the college and its staff make an important contribution to the success of the province's workers and the development of our prosperous economy. And finally, we encourage the parties to re-engage in good faith bargaining and explore all available avenues and opportunities that respect and recognize the needs of Nova Scotia students and their families and the fiscal realities we face. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased tonight to rise in my place and to take part in this very, very important debate. My day started at 6. I don't have the energy of the member from Cape Breton North, and I may repeat a little bit of my colleague, but this debate is too important to not have a say in. As a former teacher, very proud member and union rep for the Nova Scotia Teachers Union during my career, and I know how important the role that is being played here, and I'm quite astounded that what I heard for 6 years on this side of the House and the complete abandonment of that kind of support for unions is totally missing. Now, in my rebuttal to the throne speech, or sorry, to the budget speech, and it's very important to repeat here, the Minister of Finance is about to open a school, the David Copperfield School of Finance Ministers, because he is truly the illusionist beyond. I just take 3 numbers. $341 million to university payment, not to be part of this. The Minister of Education has one fairly simple explanation. Minister of Finance is a little bit more complex rationalization. $54 million in the slush fund duped Nova Scotians with having H1N1 funding in front of it. We have no idea what it may amount to. $13 million going into the Industrial Expansion Fund, which Cabinet can play around with. And we're already below $200 million in deficit for this year. So he is truly a great illusionist. We're nowhere near $592 million, but he's on his parade to get close to a balanced budget next year. And on the backs of workers like the Nova Scotia Community College teachers, he's absolutely prepared to do that. $1.5 million at a time here and there. So we need to take a look. For 15 years, Nova Scotia teachers in the public school system and the community college teachers went parallel in the raises that they received. This government is prepared to disregard the pattern and the importance of fairness to our teachers, no matter where they may be in front of students across Nova Scotia. I applaud the Nova Scotia Teachers Union for setting a strike date and taking a little bit, I guess, of a risk with going to binding arbitration. But I don't think for a minute this government wants to go down the road of binding arbitration, because anybody looking at the situation of the Nova Scotia Community College teachers, they'll get 2.5% for sure. And that's not in the plan of this government. They've already announced publicly 1%. 1% is where we're going. So I don't even think they'll risk binding arbitration,
Because when their contract was over on August the 31st, if my memory serves me correctly, a barrel of oil was going for around $130. And inflation through last September and October was very high. And it was only towards the new year that we started to feel a bit of the recession. So they deserve the 2.9. The 2.9 is not an outlandish request whatsoever. It's what our public school teachers receive. But I want to go back a little bit on what has been said this week here in the House. And since the House session started, our caucus has been clear on one message: fairness. Absolutely on fairness. We have spoken for the need of this government to treat NSCC teachers fairly, and we have spoken to the need for this government to treat students with the same degree of fairness. While it is convenient for this minister to hide behind such comments as, "We're respecting the collective bargaining process," it is clear from the actions of the Deputy Premier this is not the case. This is a government that has in many ways chosen to do their collective bargaining through the media. How can you sit down at the table? You've been told 1%. That's what's in store for Nova Scotia workers. And I don't think for a minute other unions are going to accept 1% with the promise, the distant promise of improved pensions. It just won't happen. And the numerous contracts between now and March 31st, this government had better get used to treating workers in a fair way. Today we read the Deputy Premier has great respect for the NSCC staff. Well, this government has so much respect that it has decided to use them as pawns. Remember, teachers, you are this government's test case. You are the test case. You are the litmus test for this government. Because if they give you 2.9, the contracts between now and March 31st will explode this Minister of Finance's plan to balance or come close to balancing the budget. And yet he goes and makes a one-time prepayment of $341. He used $100,000 of Nova Scotia taxpayers to get best information from Deloitte, and what was one of the first recommendations? Do not make large one-time prepayments to any of our institutions or bodies in this province. What did he do? He went right ahead and said, I disregard the $100,000 of investment for good advice. The Deputy Premier stated in his article today, this government is committed to free and fair collective bargaining. Obviously, that only applies if the faculty and professional staff at the NSCC are not looking for any more than 1% in their second year. Let's take a look at the history for a moment, because I believe there is some benefit in doing so. The NSTU staff at the Nova Scotia Community College have been without a contract since August 31st, 2008, as I stated earlier, for 16 months. Collective bargaining, 16 months. They've been at the bargaining table. February 7, 2009, the province announced they reached an agreement with the union's 10,000 public school teachers on a 2.9% wage increase for each of the contract's 2 years. An agreement that has historically seen public school teachers and the teachers at the Nova Scotia Community College receive the same deal. Now, one can only conclude with this sequence of events that the deal being offered by the previous government for teachers at the NSCC, while not what they were desiring at the time, but it was early, it has been, and we would not be at the impasse we are today. There would have been an agreement pre-June. However, now is now, and we have moved down the path where we are prepared to let students' careers be jeopardized. Tonight, we've heard a few accounts of students and what they have done to arrive at the steps and the door of future possibilities and a future career. I would have to say that in my years as a teacher and as an educator, I don't think there is any institution in our province that has undergone the transformation that has happened at Nova Scotia Community College. There is no question. Under the leadership of Ray Ivany and now Joan MacArthur Blair, and the most dedicated and educated and innovative and continuing to educate themselves, and to go into any college today and see the kind of technology that these people are using and advancing for the next generation of Nova Scotians, the next 30 or 40 years. In my back door is the Middleton campus. And when I arrived here at Province House, it was on the verge of which way to go. And we now have a vibrant college in Middleton and a world-class College of Geographic Sciences just down the road. And I can assure you, and this is no pretense of a statement, if these teachers are out on strike and on the road for any period of time, there'll be a number who will not re-enter our college system the next September. You watch and see. They can go to Humber College or Algonquin and get considerable more pay than what we pay them. But they're dedicated to our students in Nova Scotia. They want our next generation of workers to be the best in the country. And the innovation is there. And think of the contracts that Nova Scotia Community College has. EI, IMP, Boeing, DND, Scottsburn, and I could go on. This is what this government is prepared to jeopardize for $1.5 million. I'm astounded. I'm quite astounded. And to set themselves up with this facade of a giant deficit. The Minister of Education? I've been here for 6 years. The least leadership of any education minister that I have seen. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't addressing you as I should be. And of course, her words, the best thing I can do as Minister of Education, stay out of the negotiations, to allow it to go to its conclusion, and to trust that reasonable people on all sides of the negotiating table will come to a reasonable conclusion. Well, Mr. Speaker, real leadership is facing the issue head-on and recognizing that these teachers in our community college deserve not just respect, but they deserve fair compensation. But it is not in the plan. It's not in the plan. So therefore, they will likely go out on strike. But let's hope that before October 20th, this government does indeed have a change of heart. Because if not, the community college system in Nova Scotia has a profound impact on our communities and on the lives of many, and it won't be forgotten. This is a poor, poor test case that this government is prepared to engage in. Already, because of the variety of contracts that the minister and I talked about in the estimates of finance, there are so many and varied contracts. There are already workers inside the community college who have received 2.9%. That's right. So this government is not too much about fairness and seeing the big picture. So tonight, 1,000 staff members, 25,000 students are asking, why is the government not at the table negotiating? So what we have here, Mr. Speaker, is not collective bargaining like the Minister of Education is content on saying. What we have here is a take-it-or-leave-it ultimatum by this government. What we have here is a deputy premier, an individual who in the past believed strongly in collective bargaining, fairness to workers, negotiating in the media. We must ask, just how fair is that? Government purposely choose this union to make a statement that says, we will be tough. What they fail to do is to be fair. let's face it, there is not a unionized worker out there who relishes the thought of a strike. And I remember coming here, marching around Province House with 3,000 of my colleagues, and the last thing we wanted to do was to leave our students behind. But so far, this government is prepared to put teachers and students. Now, the member for Halifax Citadel, he's used to already starting down the road of an occasional ministerial statement, as we found out yesterday. Tonight, he's announced something that the Minister of Education could not do. We have a contingency plan. Another ministerial statement. Here we have it again tonight. So tomorrow, I guess the Minister of Education will reveal to the Nova Scotia Community College the contingency plan.
Can't understand why you're not in the cabinet.
So these people that we have here tonight, and in my last remark, I thank you for coming. I thank you for being here. Stay strong and stand for what you believe in. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's with a heavy heart that I stand today to speak to this resolution, this issue that is before us, and almost with a heavy heart that we have to have these hard-working teachers, the hard-working president of the Nova Scotia's Teachers Union, the chief negotiator, and I forget exactly and the CEO of the NSTU, to be here tonight, to try to find some answers that they have not gotten since they rose from the table, the negotiating table, over a week ago. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank them again for being here. And I want to thank every teacher that works in the Nova Scotia Community College system for the work that they do in bringing up the brightest and the best in the province. Mr. Speaker, I listened with quite interest to the member for Halifax, Citadel Hill, Sable Island, and talk about his experience as a professor, and how he was able to stand with his brothers and sisters and come up with agreements. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. That was then, this is now. Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Premier, I remember on all kinds of occasions that he flapped his gums when he was in the opposition and told the government, you must settle this. You must do this. You must pay more money to get this done. You must. Today, he's just not there anymore. Nope. Not quite as excited. Nope. These are different economic times. Oh, my heart breaks to hear this. He's a statesman, I can tell you. He stands there and tries to hold a true line on what's really setting them off. You know, I watch again with amazement to see the line, you know, don't go off the script. You know, I'm sure the staff are standing outside in this house, making sure that the ministers don't go off script. God forbid that the caucus members go off script as well. Mr. Speaker, I don't know who's coming up to speak after me. You know, maybe I'll hold some hope that they'll say something that we haven't heard yet tonight, which means that they are here for the people that take care of the Nova Scotia Community College system. They're here tonight to get some answers. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, I believe it was, from the questioning from the member for Cumberland South to the Premier, the Premier said, well, you know, just have to sit down, talk at the table, follow the negotiating process. We believe in the negotiating process. Well, Mr. Speaker, Did all the members in this House know that over a week ago, these folks stood up from the table because they didn't offer anything more? There was no negotiating happening here. There was 1%. 1%, take it or leave it. No more. That was wrong. And the Premier sat there yesterday and told them, oh, no, go back to the table. Back to the table. 1%, Mr. Speaker. Be ashamed. Absolutely ashamed. They're creating a two-tiered system here. Those who get it, those who don't. Mr. Speaker, can any of those members, the next person to stand up and talk, I want that person, that member of this House, that honorable member, to explain to the people in the gallery tonight what's wrong with them. Why are they second-class citizens in this case? Why are they being treated different from the other teachers in this province? Why should they go back to the table to be told the same thing that they were told a week ago? I'm seeing some members, some ministers here that I know sit on the Labor Relations Committee. And I know they've probably been discussing things, trying to find ways to do this. But what we find out tonight from the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island, speaking as a minister again, so good practice. I wish you the best. That one of these days you might get up to that front row. But we find out they have a contingency plan. That's not what we wanted to hear tonight. That's not what the people up there wanted to hear tonight. That's not what the students, the families that are affected by this issue wanted to hear. Oh, there's a contingency plan. Oh, we're going to send you emails and tell you what's going on.
Lock the doors. What's going on there?
Hogwash.
Indeed it is.
I mean, come on. Why are they here? They're here because they want some answers to the things they have not been able to get over the last number of weeks. They've sat at that table for what? 16 months. 16 months. And for the last 107 days? 108 days? 109 days? It's going to be forever at this point. They've been told nothing else.
Yep. That's it.
Fair deal for families. We're looking for families. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
Shame.
Mr. Speaker, we ran a number of resolutions in the House yesterday trying to speak to the individual communities, individual colleges. We spoke to the NSCC in Bridgewater, home to 450 full-time and 400 part-time students. What did they say? They said no. They said no. You're going to have, if they don't accept the deal, they go on strike, well, tough luck. Tough luck. Cumberland County, how many? 500 students. If they go off on strike, tough luck. Yarmouth. How many people in that one? 4. That's again 500 and 450. Tough luck. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? I'm a product of community college system. I went to community college. And I can tell you that I would have been some upset if I had to end up coming home. I went there to learn. I went there to better myself. And God darn it, I did it. And these folks are not going to have the opportunity to do that.
Shame on them.
Because if nothing else comes from this discussion this evening,
They're going home.
they're going to have to go home.
With what? What about their loans?
They've got loans, they've got families.
But they will get an email.
They'll get an email at some point to tell them, how long the strike might happen.
Let's hope the Minister of Education gets an email so she'll know what's
So,
happening.
Mr. Speaker, I can talk to the conflict that we perceive on this side of the House. The member for Bedford Birch Cove brought it up again. And I think the member for Kings West brought it up as well. The Minister of Education, in this particular case, is also Minister of Labour and Workforce Development. The Minister of Labour and Workforce Development is responsible for the Trade Union Act. She's responsible to try to bring calm, to try to find solutions to any strike in this province. Now, I can tell you that I think the member for Kings West was correct. This is a test case. You're testing a line of offer with these folks, with these teachers, these hard workers. You're going to see if they can accept that 1%, and that'll set the pattern across the board. Mr. Speaker, what they don't realize is there's what, over 400 contracts out for negotiation right now? Thousands and thousands and thousands of public service workers. 1% maybe? You know, are they going to create second-class citizens with that one as well? So, Mr. Speaker, as I wrap up my 10 minutes, and again, I'm looking forward to see exactly what the next person that's going to stand up says. And I hope there's a commitment for these folks. So as I finish, I thought I'd echo a few thoughts from our friends in the gallery. Now, you said that we need the process to follow itself through to its natural conclusion. The conclusion is when they sat down as 1%, take it or leave it. When you stand up, will you commit to binding arbitration as the union has asked for, yes or no?
Yes or no? Yes or no? All right.
Order. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to start by saying that I don't mind at all being here at this hour. I remember a time when I was here at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning debating Bill 68 when a government of a former day, some of the members who are across the floor from me, part of that government, certainly had no problem taking away the right to collective bargaining of healthcare workers across this province, Mr. Speaker, and driving that piece of legislation through this House over a 4 or a 5 day period and keeping members here round the clock, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to start, first of all, by saying that I, too, work in the post-secondary education system. I was very fortunate to have a career teaching at the School of Social Work prior to being elected. And I want to say that some of the best students I had in that program were graduates of the Nova Scotia Community College system who had done the community services program at the community college. And I also want to say that in the field where I frequently supervised social work students, I often had students working under the supervision of graduates of the Nova Scotia Community College system through in that community services program. And I know what excellent students and excellent graduates come out of the community college system. Last year, Mr. Speaker, during Democracy 250, I served on the select committee with the honourable member from Victoria the Lakes and perhaps some other members here going around the province, and it was absolutely delightful to be in community colleges across this province, meeting with students, attending the community college, and the caliber of students in this program, various programs, was very apparent, Mr. Speaker, and I spoke of that on any occasion that I had to talk about what fantastic young adults we have around this province in our community college system. Mr. Speaker, the prospect of a strike at a community college is of great concern to all of us here in this House. And labor disruptions are difficult for everyone involved, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that students and the faculty, their families, their communities, and the province generally are very concerned. And we all must be concerned. Mr. Speaker, tonight I rise in my place to speak briefly as the Minister of Health. And on behalf of the Department of Health, who has a fine partnership with the Nova Scotia Community College in helping us address human resource challenges in the healthcare field. Earlier today, when the honourable member from Cumberland South introduced the motion for an emergency debate, he spoke to the concern about the healthcare field, particularly the continuing care field, and the potential impact on human resources for our continuing care sector if, in fact, we see a labor disruption at the community college. And Mr. Speaker and all members of the House, it's very true that graduates from the Nova Scotia Community College, the Licensed Practical Nursing Program, Community Care Assistance Program, and the Residential Rehabilitation Worker Program, and other healthcare worker programs are an important part of our healthcare system, and the community college system is very much a part of helping us graduate men and women in this field to come work in the long-term care sector in our province. And Mr. Speaker, I, as much as any other person, would hope that the collective bargaining process will avert a labor disruption so that the students can continue in their programs on their way to securing jobs in our province, in our healthcare system. Mr. Speaker, I feel somewhat compelled as Minister of Health, it's partly my duty as Minister of Health, to not only ensure that our healthcare system functions well on a day-to-day basis, but that there be a certain degree of public confidence, Mr. Speaker, in the system and in the health human resources that are coming into the system, and indeed are planning for the workforce. And Mr. Speaker, it's important that I note that a labor disruption would not immediately impact on our long-term care sector. Mr. Speaker, labor demands for LPNs and the continuing care workers in this sector have been easing thanks to the efforts over the past few years of things like the bursary program and efforts to attract more people to these fields. And a large number of graduates have come through the program. And Mr. Speaker, in the case of the continuing care assistants, the Nova Scotia Community College is just one of the options for people looking to receive training. We also partner with many private sector companies and organizations such as Northwood and Shannix and other facilities, Mr. Speaker. And so I want to assure people that while I would hope that we can see a resolution through the collective bargaining process, Mr. Speaker, that
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Minister has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is very much the case that we have been building our health human resources for the long-term care sector. And we will continue to do that in a variety of ways, and I hope very much that the community college will continue to be one of those ways. Now, Mr. Speaker, previous speakers have made a great deal of what they call a slush fund, a $54 million so-called slush fund that the Minister of Minister of Finance has established in his budget. And Mr. Speaker, I want to take a moment to explain that we as a province are facing a worldwide pandemic, H1N1 pandemic, which will require the vaccination of the people of Nova Scotia, which will require the staff to do the vaccination, which will require the supplies to do the vaccination. We have ordered over $5 million of ventilators for our healthcare system. We have ordered $1 million in surgical masks for our healthcare system. Mr. Speaker, the $54 million in part has been earmarked as a contingency fund for the H1N1 pandemic. And some of the members next door don't understand what the word contingency means, Mr. Speaker. It means contingent,
Order.
contingent on...
Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member has the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that as the Minister of Health, I wanted to make those points that it is important that we have a fund to cover H1N1 needs, and that's where the resources reside, Mr. Speaker, in that restructuring fund. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I listened very closely to the Health Minister talk about H1N1 and all that went along with that, but that has very little to do with the plight of the teachers that are sitting up here tonight. As a matter of fact, it has nothing to do with it. It's just a commercial for our own department here tonight. You know what, Mr. Speaker, I've been in this House for 16 years. And during that 16 years, I've watched and listened to the NDP wail about just about everything that happened in this province that was wrong for 16 years. I listened to the Health Minister when she was sitting over here saying, why should we trust you now? Why should we trust you now? In opposition. I've listened to the Finance Minister sitting over here in opposition, telling people about openness and transparency, honesty, all of those things. When he goes against his own report that he got from Deloitte Touche and spends money for nothing, he didn't even take their recommendations and tried to make him and his government look good at the expense of the previous government. That's what the NDP is all about, Mr. Speaker. That's what they're all about. I'm going to tell you something. There are about 5 cabinet ministers over there. There are about 5 cabinet ministers, the Minister of Health, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Transportation, the Deputy Premier and the Premier, who have duped the rest of them who are sitting over there into thinking that they're going to be around for a long time. Well, I got news for you. You backbenchers over there, I can see about 9 or 10 of you are going to be one-termers in this House. You're gone after the next election unless you stop listening to the doctrine you're getting from the front benches, particularly from the Finance Minister and the Health Minister and the Premier. So smarten up before it's too late. Look after your constituencies and stop listening to the dogma you've been served up from the front benches here. I'm surprised that the Finance Minister didn't speak to this very important resolution tonight. He might have added something to it. But you know what? The die has been cast, Mr. Speaker. The member from Halifax Citadel, Sable Island, already told everybody here tonight that they're going out, but they don't need them, because they're going to teach the students by email. That's the contingency plan. The would-be cabinet minister already told that he's been very good at letting cabinet secrets out in the last couple of days. But anyway, we know that he's already told us that. And I got to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I know where they can find the money if they want. All they got to do is go to the Fisheries Loan Board and get a loan from them. The minister over there had no problem getting a loan to look after his boat and his equipment. Just throw another few dollars in the pot and look after them teachers that are in the gallery here tonight and get a settlement. I got to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that the Marconi campus in your constituency, bordering my constituency, with Dave McLean and his teachers and the students down there, deserve better than what this government is serving up to them in the last few days. The deputy premier negotiating and telling people in the newspaper what they're going to get. And you're right. This is a test case. There's no question. What's been said here tonight, this is conditioning. You know, like Pavlov, this is conditioning. This is conditioning for what's coming down the road. You know, and of course the deputy premier didn't bother to check with the premier before he made those statements. The premier tried to do damage control, then gave up on the damage control, because now the deputy premier is taking to writing op-eds saying what he's going to do in the government. Not the premier, not the finance minister, and not the minister of education and labor, which in itself, I believe, is a conflict of interest. She's not even around to debate this.
Order, please. The honourable member's been around long enough to know that you can not say whether a member is in the chamber or out of the chamber.
I won't say it again.
Thank you very much.
I'm saying to you, Mr. Speaker, that I'd like to hear from people who have the ability to settle this issue, that have the ability to do the right thing. There's nothing wrong with binding arbitration. It works. The teachers involved, the NSCC, I want binding arbitration, right? There's nothing wrong with it. They want it. The police got it. They're happy with it. Why doesn't this government give them binding arbitration? Or what are they afraid of? What are they afraid of? That they might get a fair settlement?
Their agenda.
They deserve a fair settlement. So why doesn't this government give it to them? Again, Mr. Speaker, I can recall when they were in opposition over here, we had to listen to them day in and day out, wailing about all the ills of government, whether it was a conservative government over there or a liberal government. I've been here for both of them. I've been in government and I've been in opposition, and one thing is consistent when the NDP were in opposition. Nothing was right in this House. Everything was wrong. And when they got in, they were going to right all the ills of Nova Scotia, all the ills of the public service. They were going to look after everybody. Well, there's a good start. Ask them people up there. And worse than that, Mr. Speaker, the deputy premier has fired a shot across the bow for the future. He said that no longer am I a trade unionist, no longer are my roots going to be employed here. I'm now a statesman. I'm the deputy premier of Nova Scotia. Suddenly, a conversion on the road to Damascus. You know, another one, like the finance minister. You know, converts. I'm going to tell you backbenchers over there, don't listen to this crowd in front here anymore, because your careers will be very short in this House. I'll guarantee you that. Very short. Mr. Speaker, I guess my time is getting short, but I want to tell you, something about fairness here. I thought, I really did, when the NDP got elected, that they were going to change things. They said that in opposition. Give us a chance and we'll change things, you know? Because, yeah, you know, they told my constituents too. You know, the orange tide was sweeping Nova Scotia with all these grand promises. And here we are, we're not 3 weeks into their first session, and we've got cabinet scandals already and going almost daily now. We've got would-be ministers making cabinet statements. You know, we've got backbenchers going around the constituencies doling out money that's the rightful domain of the ministers in government. We've got a political staff that would rival anything in the history of this province. You can't walk out there in a day there's so many political staff there. And by the way, we're for
order, please. I wonder if the member would speak on the resolution.
Oh yeah.
Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. The order, please. Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. Well, order, please. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much. Again, let me say that the Deputy Premier set the bar when he went publicly in advance of negotiations, while negotiations were continuing, and said, this is what the bar is going to be. No more. Let us hear all what he's saying. He said that I know what's best, the finance minister knows what's best, the premier knows what's best. So here's what the bar is going to be. You 1% and that's it. So why are we bothering with any more negotiations? The bar is set. The education minister says she can't do anything about it. She's not going to bother doing anything about it. She's not going to get involved. And then she puts on the other hat and says, as labor minister, I'm not getting involved there either. You know, so, and then you have the premier contradicting the deputy premier. And I might say to you, I've never seen that, Mr. Speaker, that the deputy premier would be contradicted in public by the premier. And the deputy premier would remain in that job the next day. But anything goes over there. We know there's a conflict of interest with one of the ministers, and yet the premier denies it. Goes out